Join me in my kitchen as I make a last minute big dinner from scratch for my family. This day just did not go as planned. We had been out of town and I got home ready to make some bread and realized I had left my starter out. And yeah, that is not an overreaction. This is the worst shape my starter has ever been in. I had neglected it for a few days before we went out of town, but I was planning on just feeding it and putting it in the fridge while we were gone, and I just forgot. It smells so bad. So I'm going to throw it away. Well, most of it. I'm going to save just a tiny bit and just rebuild it. It is so hard to kill an established starter. Now, when it's been neglected for a week plus like this, it takes a few days to get it back to where it needs to be, but you could see there were still some bubbles at the bottom, still some activity there, so I'm not going to throw it away. Avoid throwing your starter away at all costs. So during this rebuilding process, I'm not feeding it a ton. I don't want to waste flour because I'm not going to use the discard while I'm rebuilding. So I just fed a little bit of flour, a little bit of water, and I'll set that to the side. But anyway, I'll probably make another video showing you the process of like rebuilding my starter and making bread. But back to why this day didn't go as planned. I didn't have my starter, so I couldn't bake bread. And my original plan was just to make a meal that didn't require any bread and wait a couple days until my starter recouped. But my husband requested chicken parm with garlic cheesy bread, and I couldn't say no. So that was already kind of later in the day. I didn't have much time. I ended up with about an hour to make this big meal from scratch. And it worked out just fine. So what I did was made a faux French bread, and that's what I'm working on here first. This is like the easiest thing ever. And the secret ingredient is another, piece of contraband in the homesteading community, but I always keep it on hand. It's just instant yeast because you don't always have time for sourdough. Sometimes your starter's not in good shape. So the recipe I will put in the description, but it's really easy. It's 1 cup of warm water, 1 tablespoon of instant yeast, 1 tablespoon of sugar, a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of butter, and then 3 cups of flour. So this is instant yeast. You don't need to proof it. Just mix it all up. Put everything in a bowl. You can see, like, I'm all out of sorts today, trying to get us unpacked and settled back in. None of my dishes are clean, so I'm using a, serving dish and a fork here to whisk this up. But you know what? It is what it is. I want to get this meal prepared. So I'm adding in my last 2 cups of flour here. Just gonna whisk, fork this up here, this dough, and knead it. You do need to knead this. This is not a no-knead recipe. So I did knead this for probably 5 to 7 minutes or so until it was really smooth. Once it is smooth, then just roll it out into a long, kind of like baguette shape. Transfer it to, I'm just using a cookie sheet with some parchment paper here. And I'm kind of in a hurry, so I'm going to proof this in my oven. It's instant yeast, it would take like 30 to 40 minutes to proof. But in my oven set on proof, it'll take 20 minutes. So just gonna proof this and then move on to the next step in preparing my meal here. I need an egg white for the egg wash for that loaf. So I'm separating the egg white from the yolk here, and I'm gonna use this yolk when it comes time to fry the chicken for the chicken parm. So I'm just whisking up this egg white for the egg wash for the bread, gonna set that aside. Now I'm gonna work on breading my chicken. So I did prepare my chicken before I started this video, like right when I decided I was gonna make this meal, by having 4 chicken breasts. I just cut them in half and soaked them in buttermilk. Soaking in buttermilk as long as possible really makes your chicken nice and tender when you're going to fry it. I would have soaked it longer if I would have known earlier that I was making this, but I didn't know, so that's okay. What I'm doing now is in a Ziploc, I added 3 cups of flour, a tablespoon or more of salt, a, let's say, scant tablespoon of pepper, and maybe half tablespoon, I don't know. I'm just adding what I have here. Onion powder, half tablespoon of garlic powder. And then the last thing I will add, and this is for the breading for the chicken, the last thing I will add is some smoked paprika. This is something I really like and use a lot of. So just a tablespoon of smoked paprika. So pretty easy. Tablespoon of everything, probably a little more of the salt. And then I'm going to shake this all up. You know, a lot of people really like to use like a paper bag, but I like using a Ziploc because I can zip it when I put my chicken in there and shake it up, and it's, you know, not going to make a big mess. It'll make a little mess, but not a big mess. So I've got this ready to go. And my timer is going off, so my bread should be finished proofing. I'm just going to pull it out of the oven, and yes, looks wonderful. So, you know, I know some people, you can't tolerate bread that's not like from long fermented, so you have to do all sourdough. We're just not an all sourdough household because I don't always have time to do sourdough. Like, we live a modern life. Sometimes I have to make meals in a hurry. And even using instant yeast, it's still going to be healthier than stuff you get at the store if you're using like a really good quality flour and quality ingredients otherwise, because you don't have the additives. So I just don't worry about it. Now, if we had someone in the family with like severe gluten intolerance or something, I would worry about it because I understand that you just can't process gluten as well. So you need to ferment your wheat. So I just scored this and brushing it with an egg wash. Now this is going to bake at 425 for like 18 to 20 minutes. I set my timer for the full 20. This is going to be turned into garlic cheese bread. So I want the crust to be nice and browned so that it doesn't get soggy. So you'll see what I mean. But now I am going to switch gears a little bit and prepare my garlic butter for, when the time comes to make the garlic cheese bread. So I've got a stick of my fresh butter from good old Sally here in this bowl, and I'm just grating up a few cloves of garlic. I love grated garlic in butter, like homemade garlic butter with some fresh herbs. It's very hard to beat it. And my garden is, it's still doing the trick for me here. So I still do have lots of stuff coming in from the garden, probably for a few more weeks yet until we get that first frost. So lots of herbs still, and I'm using parsley for the garlic butter for my cheesy bread, and then also going to reserve some of this parsley for the chicken parm, and you'll see how I use this. Getting the butter right really is the key to a good garlic cheese bread. You need a ton of butter. You need to like lather the thing in garlic butter. So here, like I said, I've just got a half cup of butter. I've got 3 or 4 cloves of grated garlic, a teaspoon of salt, and some minced fresh parsley. And my faux French loaf is finished in under an hour. It only took 5 minutes to mix up, a couple minutes to shape, 20 minutes to proof, and 20 minutes to bake. And look how beautiful that is. Like I said, I know it's not sourdough, but sometimes you just gotta improvise a little bit. So I've got my garlic butter all mixed up here, and I'm just going to set this to the side. I don't want to cut into that fresh loaf when it's still hot. I want to let it sit and finish cooking on the inside so I can move on, switch gears, and start frying my chicken. And that means I got to put the old apron on. I start frying things here. Usually I use lard or tallow, but I don't have any right now, which is a rare occurrence, so I've just got coconut oil here. Those are the 3 things I use for frying: lard, tallow, or coconut oil. So generous amount of coconut oil in my skillet. I heated my skillet first, so I always heat the skillet with nothing in it, then add my oil or fat, whatever I'm going to be cooking in, and heat that up. For frying chicken, I believe you want your oil at like 360, something like that. I always just know by looking when it's ready. All right, so I had my chicken breast soaking in that buttermilk. I just pulled them out of the buttermilk and then added my egg yolk I reserved from earlier to that buttermilk, whisked it up, and you'll see how I'm going to use that when I bread my chicken breast there. But first I'm going to get some water boiling, some salt water boiling here for my pasta. Now, I do not have to make pasta from scratch tonight because my dry stash is good to go. So I can just pull some pasta off of the shelf and it'll be done in like 10 minutes. So, that's why I always like to make those double and triple batches. So I'm going to throw a salad together as well. That was another one of John's requests tonight. All right. My oil is looking nice and hot. So I'm going to get my chicken ready to fry. So this is how I do it. I have my flour breading mixture from earlier. I'm going to put a few pieces of chicken in here and shake it up. So it goes in the flour first. Then it gets dipped back in the buttermilk and egg mixture. So it soaked in buttermilk. Then I coated it with flour. Now it's going back in the buttermilk and egg. I'm going to make sure this is, completely coated. Got to turn these pieces over here. Now, once all of this chicken is coated in the buttermilk again, it's going to go back in the flour mixture. I'm going to shake it up again. So everything gets done twice. This is the key to a really good crispy fried chicken that has like a really good, just a really nice thick crust. Would you call it a crust? A really nice thick crust to it, since these are chicken breasts, so they're skinless, so you don't have the skin on there, so you really want the breading to stick. You don't want it to be coming off. All right, I wanted to let my oil heat up for just another second, so I opened up a can of my marinara here. This recipe I'll link in the description. It's on my blog. You guys have seen me make it. So it's nice to just have that canned and ready. You're just going to heat that up. And now, see, look at that. The breading, the double dipping. I'm telling you guys, this is the way to go because the breading stays on. And like I said, it's just really thick. So now I'm going to fry my chicken. I don't know how long I fry chicken on each side. I fry until it's done. I just look. When it looks done, then it's done. When you're first starting out in the kitchen, cooking, baking, frying, doing all kinds of things, get yourself a little battery-powered little thermometer, like a meat thermometer, and just check the internal temperature, because you'll probably get it wrong. But after a while, you will kind of develop an eye for these things, and you'll just need less tools. You'll know by the look of things, and that's how it is for me now frying chicken. I just know by looking. So while this first batch is frying, I went ahead and breaded up the next batch so it's ready to go. And see, like that just good golden brown crisp there. Just looks done on that side. So that's how I know to flip it. All right, well, I think baking that French loaf took total of like 45 minutes, and I really am going to finish this meal in about an hour. And part of that is because I had stuff prepped, like this pasta. Yes, it's from scratch, but it was already made and dried, so it doesn't take as long. I had the red sauce made and canned, so part of it is just, the prep. Now, while I've got some chicken frying over there, I'm going to get my bread ready. It's cooled for 10 minutes. It didn't need too long. It's not a super thick bread, but look at that. It just looks delicious. You can't beat it for an instant loaf. So I'm going to lather this garlic herb butter on here, nice and thick. This, like I said before, this really is the key to a good garlic cheese bread, is lots and lots of butter. Now at this point, John and the kids were watching, looking on very, very anxiously. They were very excited about this, and with every step they got more excited. As I added the garlic butter, they're excited, and then when I topped it with cheese, they were really excited. This was just a highly anticipated meal. All right, so as my chicken finishes frying in the skillet, I'm pulling it off, and I just have some parchment paper on a cookie sheet. I'm gonna put the chicken here because it is going to go into the oven just briefly, and you will see why here in just a minute. Like I said, this was a pretty quick process. I halved those chicken breasts. They're not super thick. They're pretty thin, so they really didn't take long to fry at all. Now my pasta is finished. So I have some more of that garlic herb butter. And I'm just gonna add it into the pasta because, why not? Once again, we've talked about this on this channel, but when you get your butter from your cow who is grass-fed, then the butter is basically like eating a salad. That is what I'm just going to go with. So my chicken is finishing up here. These are the last couple of pieces, and really the garlic bread and the chicken will only need to go in the oven for maybe 5 minutes or so because it's just going into mainly just to melt the cheese. So I've got my classic Emo's Provel cheese here. If you watch I think one of my most recent videos, then you saw Emo's is a St. Louis specialty, and we do live in Missouri, outside of St. Louis. So we are Provel cheese people, but you can't find it other places. It's only in St. Louis. All right. I've got this bread topped with like a monster amount of cheese. It's going to go in the oven, and I'll put that in first. And while that is in the oven, I'm going to get my chicken prepared, stick that in the oven real quick, and then we will be ready to eat. This is so close to being finished. So I had my red sauce heating up back there on the back burner. Just going to top each piece of chicken with a little bit of this marinara. Now, when I make my marinara, I put a lot of herbs and garlic and even onion in there. It all gets mixed up with an immersion blender so that the texture is even, but this is a very, very flavorful marinara. So I didn't need to do anything to it. I just heated it up. Now I'm going to top with more cheese. And, as I've said before, no matter how much I practice my cheese making and how good I get at that, this is just one type of cheese that we will not quit buying because when we make certain dishes, that is what is expected of me, is that I top it with this particular cheese. So now I'm going to put this in the oven too so that that cheese can melt. And gosh, I think that's it. I think all I have to do is just check on everything and wait. So the chicken was actually done first. I didn't want to leave that chicken in very long because I didn't want the chicken to dry out. It was fried perfectly. I just want that cheese melted really good. And look at that. It's melted perfectly. So I'm going to set this to the side while I let the garlic bread have just another minute. And actually at the very end, when I do the garlic cheese bread, it's been in the oven for maybe 5 to 7 minutes, the garlic cheese bread that is. Now at the very end, I'm going to turn my oven on broil for 1 minute, just so the cheese gets nice and bubbly. So during that 1 minute, I'm just going to plate up some chicken parm here and show you guys the final product. My family is waiting anxiously to eat, so you will not see me serving them sitting around the table because they're sitting there laughing. We're all talking. That's why I do voiceovers in my videos, because I'm always talking to my family. And yeah, it would be really hard for me to talk into the camera and then, talk to all of them at the same time. So this just turned out beautifully. I'm so excited about this meal. And I have about 10 seconds left on my 1 minute broil before my bread is finished. Just peeking at it, and it looks pretty good. So I'm gonna pull this out, and it's very, very hot, but that's okay. That's good. I want it hot. I want the cheese nice and melty and stretchy. So I will go ahead and cut into this bad boy. This just was so, so delicious. And plate everything up and tell the hungry people that it is officially time to eat. So see like how putting a really thick layer of garlic butter on is key because it kind of saturates the bread. But then that's why I cooked the loaf longer, because the crust was substantial enough to not be soggy. Anyway, there's a method to my madness. So the chicken is cooked really well here, paired perfectly with the garlic butter pasta. And that's that for this meal from scratch in under an hour. So we're gonna go eat. I will see you guys next week.